I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
What if I've just been following the rules this whole time and I had no idea what I, myself, wanted? I was not in touch with myself.
Today's episode is sponsored by Knock Knock, the makers of the unbearably adorable and exceptionally useful Fill in the Love collection of fill-in-the-blank journals, postcards, and letters that you can use to express your love to anyone. Send some love with Fill in the Love from Knock Knock. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. We posted an article last week called My Husband's Vasectomy Saved Our Marriage, and we've had quite a lot of response from listeners about it. Some of you are in support of vasectomy, and some of you are very much opposed. So I would like to hear from the rest of you. Gentlemen, would you consider a vasectomy to save your marriage or to reignite the passion in your relationship? And women, is a vasectomy something that you would consider asking of your partners? Post your thoughts on our Facebook page or email me at host@together.guide. I would love to know your thoughts on this. Now on to our episode. Today's episode is about the bumpy start of what is now a very healthy non-monogamous relationship. And our interview is also about a practice called orgasmic meditation. If you don't know about orgasmic meditation, don't worry. Our guests today, Robert and Morgan, will define it for you by way of telling their fascinating story. Now, to give you some quick background, Robert also wrote an article for us called She Gave Me Permission to Sleep Around. We published that a couple of months ago, and it tells another aspect of the story that they're telling us today. I'll link to it in the show notes in case you'd like to read that. So with that, let's go to our interview with Robert and Morgan.
I'm a life and business coach, and Morgan came to me for business coaching about 18 months ago.
You started dating a client?
No, kind of, not exactly. We had a 2-hour window, so I booked a 2-hour package with her. And she came in, and I looked at her website, and I thought, oh, she's really cute. She's really, really cute. And then she came in, and she was more attractive than her pictures. And I, of course, had a very stoic look on my face. So I'll never date a life coaching client, but business coaching is a little gray area. So she came in, and I was very stoic, and she, I don't know what your experience was. Were you flirting during that interview?
No. I was not flirting.
Maybe
but
a little bit?
I was wanting to flirt.
I see.
Oh, whoa.
But there was no flirting on your side, so I was not going to start the flirting unless you started it.
You wanted to flirt. I kind of wonder what's the actual... I mean, there is a qualitative difference, but I'm wondering if the energy is the same.
I sense something, and... a lot of women will not flirt first unless they're flirted with.
Yeah.
Or they'll flirt discreetly, hoping the guy will flirt overtly, so then the woman feels safe to flirt overtly, if you get the mathematical equation there.
If you get it, yeah.
If you get it. So I was very stoic, and then we ended the session, and she's walking out, and then she turned and says, do you still Om? Om being orgasmic meditation, which is a practice part of One Taste where I taught.
Well, okay, now, how did you know that he owned in the first place? Had you internet stalked him?
No, I had no idea who he was at all. A friend of mine I was oming with said to me, you should meet Rob.
Oh, okay, so you met through the community of this technique called oming, which is orgasmic meditation.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was no longer part of the organization when I was there. Mm-hmm. But I was looking for a business coach.
Yeah.
And my friend said, you should meet Rob.
Okay. All right. So you walked out, and now had you done the equation? Had you subtly flirted so that she could overtly flirt?
No.
You hadn't even done that?
No, very stoic. But she turned and she said, do you home? And what I heard is, do you want to home? Which she denies as the motivation. She was taking a survey.
That was not what I was
understand.
saying.
But that's what I heard. What I heard was, do you still home? And I went, yeah. I still own. And then as she left, like her skirt lifted just a slight degree, showing a little more of her fabulous legs. And I was like, And then she exited my home office at the time.
Wow, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good for two reasons. One is that I just recently read a report that there's new research out that establishes that men think women are flirting with them when in fact women are not. Frequently, and
totally.
particularly in college, so
Yeah.
younger men more often. But that is a common occurrence, which leads to a lot of sexual harassment disputes and problems, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, you thought, wait a minute, is she flirting with me? And so, but the answer is kind of a gray area. You weren't flirting with him, but you wanted to.
I was like ready to go. If there was a signal.
If I gave any
But there was
indication.
no signal.
Very professional.
Yeah.
Very, very stoic.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the second reason I love that story is if I understand it, the whole thing about oming is that it's kind of only partially sexual, right? I mean, it is about orgasm. I mean, I'm not an expert, and I need to understand it better, but it's about orgasm, but it's not about sex. So it's kind of like if you're the recipient of this technique, if you're the one having or who's, well, both people are having a kind of an orgasm, but if you're the woman, I guess, you could do it with any man, even somebody you're not sexually attracted to, or any partner, even someone you're not sexually attracted to, right?
It's a convoluted question with a even more convoluted answer.
All right, so try to unravel
this is
them.
not One Taste's viewpoint. This is my viewpoint.
Yeah.
I'm no longer part of the organization, though I did co-create it and owned it for 10 years. But my viewpoint is that oming should be for what you want it to be. So for some people who ohm, it really is about connection and as a practice. And I've owned with lots of women I was not attracted to, never wanted to have sex with, never wanted to even flirt with, and had some of the most sensational experiences with those people. And so to me, oming was a practice. It really was a way for me to feel more and connect more and know more. And it had me bypass a lot of my rules and behaviors because I put myself in a position of stroking a woman's genitals who I would never think I would ever touch without oming. So it expanded a lot of my viewpoints.
Yeah. It expanded your viewpoint. I mean, you got to touch women's genitals who you wouldn't normally get to touch.
True.
It's sort of is part of what you just said.
Yes.
But so that it's not only salaciousness, what's the other part that I missed?
The part is really, it's about connection. And when I would ohm, I would feel a lot in my body. And so women I would never feel attracted to, I could feel their energy and their orgasm inside my body. And I had some really incredible experiences from this place that I never would venture with my pre-ohm mind.
Yeah.
And so it was a great expansion.
Now, some of our listeners are going to be nodding their heads saying, yes, exactly. And some of our listeners are going to be saying, bullshit.
What the fuck? They're going to say, what the fuck? I get it. I totally get it. I did it for 10 years. I taught over 400 workshops and had the same questions over and over again. I get it.
Yeah. Well, since we're on the topic, let's delve into it a little bit more. What were some of those questions and how would you respond to them?
Oh, there's hundreds of questions. The standard question is, how do you own with someone you're not attracted to? Another question is, what's in it for the guy? Another question was sort of like, what is this thing? Is it foreplay? I mean, there's a litany of questions.
Okay, yeah. Would you answer those first two? And also the third, kind of from the approach of, is this just bullshit or is this really something more than just an orgasm?
Okay.
And then, Morgan, we're going to let you talk too, I promise.
Yeah, please. Oming with people I wasn't attracted to, it was a process for me to get beyond my scope because I had all the viewpoints of a normal male in society. And so I remember oming with this one woman. She asked me on her birthday. And I was so not only physically unattracted to her, but like emotionally, she had kind of like a Tourette sort of thing. So she would say all these things, and I really disliked her as a person. I really, really disliked her. And says, "Rob, will you own with me on my birthday?" And how can you say no? I mean, you can say no, but how do you really say no to that? So I was like, all right.
Especially if you're in a community where that's a normal thing that's happening.
So we get into position to make kind of a long story short. And it was one of the most sensational ohms and one of the most educational ohms I had ever had to that point. This was early in my ohming practice. And it really blew my viewpoint of like, wow, my judgments, my viewpoints, my rules were stopping me from having so many experiences. And that woman, who we actually became friends, we never became close friends, but she taught me this really valuable lesson that my viewpoints are stopping me from living.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
You saw that insight in the rest of your life.
The rest of my life.
Yeah. he just said a very profound thing and then just in one sentence, and then you just dropped it.
It's called a pregnant pause. It's a teaching technique, actually. It lets you absorb and catch up with what's going on.
I love it. It's also kind of a humble way to have a profound insight. You don't make too much of it.
True.
Which I appreciate. Okay, so then how about to the second question?
Second question is, what's in it for the guy? More women tend to ask that question than guys when I was teaching.
Oh, okay.
They're just like, why does a guy want to do this? And for me, before I started oming, I was pretty numb and dumb. I was a New York Jew, misogynistic, chauvinistic. Really,
for real? I mean, that's
real.
A big statement.
I was, and it wasn't my fault. I wasn't a bad person, but I grew up, in a society that taught me to be numb and dumb. It taught me to think I was better than. I was a firstborn Jew. It just was part of my culture. And I had this flash that there was so much more for me to learn. I started to stroke. And over the 14 years I was practicing, it taught me to feel. And it taught me about my viewpoints. And it showed me what was going on. And now, Morgan come in the room and she can look just fine, but I know something's up. I'm like, is everything up? Is everything okay over there? And she's like, yeah, everything's fine. And I'm like, my little spidey senses, wah, wah, and I'm just like, are you sure there's nothing going on? It just taught me to feel. And now I have a really exquisite sense of what's going on in the feeling.
Yeah. Which then allows you to do something about it.
Expand everything.
Expanded
my sex life. I'm a much better lover now. I'm a much better partner. I communicate different. I listen different. So, really for me, it was an expansion of sensing. And what's in it for a guy is guys really do want to know how to touch a woman. And oming is an exceptional place for a man to learn how to touch a woman in a world where there's not a lot of honesty around sexuality. And so there's a constant feedback loop in oming, and it's just, readjusted my entire world.
Okay. That makes sense. Now to the third question, I realized we haven't talked much about what oming actually is.
Okay.
We've both assumed that everybody knows because you and I do, all three of us do. Would you explain it by way of explaining whether or not it's baloney?
Absolutely. So orgasmic meditation, or oming, is a practice. It's in a long lineage of the practice that Nicole and I started a company in 2004 called One Taste to spread. And oming is a structured practice around sexuality where one person, male or female or any gender, takes the most dexterous part of their body, their index finger, and strokes the most sensitive part of a woman's body, the upper left-hand quadrant of her clitoris, up, down, for 15 minutes.
Left from her perspective or?
From her perspective.
So right from the Omer's perspective.
Yeah, if you just think about her body and then you think about her genitals as a clock, there's 12 o'clock and then 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. You're stroking the 1 to 2 o'clock position, the upper left-hand quadrant of her clitoris.
Got it. Okay.
For 15 minutes for pleasurable effect, without goal, without commerce, as a practice for both people to feel the sense of orgasm, not climax, orgasm, the orgasmic feeling that exists for the ride going up and down for 15 minutes. You close the practice. It's not foreplay. You say, thank you, enjoy that om, and then you go about your day, which may include sex, but it's a separate practice.
Sex is separate from it.
Yes.
And it's 15 minutes so that you don't have an agenda like climax in mind.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, great. And Morgan, how long had you been doing this practice when you met Robert?
I think I'd been oming for 4 months. Probably about 4 months, yeah.
And you'd heard about him because of his involvement in One Taste, or he was just totally new?
No, I had no idea that there was any men involved with One Taste on the upper echelon because I came in after he had exited.
Oh, right. And this woman, Nicole, is now the head of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when I met Rob, because of our business consultation, I asked him if he still owned because my friend who had introduced us said, he co-founded One Taste.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason that I even knew that he would know what oming was. And then I asked him to om.
Did you think to yourself, if anybody's good at this, it's going to be him?
I didn't really know that much about his role or who he was or anything. I had there was no knowledge. I looked online, I couldn't really find anything. And I didn't really know what he was. But what happened was we had a phone call before our first session, and I was in the park with my kids on the phone talking to him, and I had this premonition, we're going to date. I just knew.
Wow.
But I hadn't seen a picture of him, and nothing had happened. So when I met him, and he was just adorable, really turned me on. So then I thought, okay, I got to ask him if he wants to own. Because he wasn't making any moves on me.
But wait, I thought you said it wasn't asking if he wanted
the
to.
story is coming out now.
I did, when I left, I asked him if he wanted to own.
Okay.
Or if he did own still, because I was curious, like, if it was even a possibility. I wasn't asking to own at that time.
Just a little bit.
But I was kind of curious, like, do you still own? Is it a possibility? And then you didn't ask me to own or anything. So I was like, okay, maybe not.
Well, then how did it transition from that?
So a few weeks later, I was thinking to myself, if I could own with anyone, who would I own with?
Yeah.
And then he popped into my head. So I sent him an email and I said, do you want to own? And he said yes. And then I came over and we had this really awkward conversation about keeping business, bifurcating the business and the oming and all this other stuff. And then we had a great om. It was really sexy and hot. And he kind of started to walk away from me as I was walking out the door. And I just, at that point in my life, I kind of had made the decision that I'm going to live from my desire and not from my fear. So everything in life, I was making decisions different than I had in the past. And so I just said, I have to say something or else I will regret it and I'll be sad and I'll be upset with myself. So I said to him, I really like you. I'm really attracted to you. I have no idea how you feel about me. And if you don't reciprocate the feelings, that's totally fine. And I turned and started to walk away because I was so mortified.
That you had just said that?
Yes, because I am not a person that's very forward. I do not ask men out. I'm like, I'm just, not, that's just not my style at all. But I had to do it because I was living from desire, not from fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
I lost my mind. Literally. Because normally I'm a very consent oriented person, especially around sexuality. So what that means often when I want to make a move or kiss or someone, I'll just go slowly and just kind of do the gentle lean in, just like a slow lean in. And I can tell if they want me to or not. Their face changes. They turn their head, they back away. I give them time to sort of scurry if they're not interested in kissing me. But this one, I just went in there, sauntered over and just grabbed her and kissed her. And
it was hot.
I was like, there was some part of me that just knew, like there was some chemistry or connection. And so
was this right after the om?
This was om and then
close
talk
the container,
and then she was leaving. So it was a good half an hour later after talking. Mm-hmm. So
well, you guys talk about it as if it's kind of surprising that all these feelings were present. And you would know better than me because you've done this so many times. But as somebody who's never done this, what I'm imagining is that after an orgasm, whether there's climax involved or not, there's a ton of oxytocin.
Yep.
And if it's the first interaction, probably also dopamine and serotonin. So you're both flying high. So of course you're going to have affinity for one another. I mean, who wouldn't? No, Morgan's shaking her head no. What?
No,
Say more.
I had a lot of ohms. There was nothing. I mean, friendship, yes. And connection, yes.
Yeah.
But no sexual connection, no chemistry, nothing.
From both directions? Well, you don't know, I guess.
I don't know.
the guys dug you probably. They wanted to get in your pants further after that, I'm sure.
I had a few invitations, but but not on my side, no.
It's true. It's a practice, and it's really about the mindset walking into the practice. So I totally understand what you're saying, and if you believe to your biology, that could happen. But you have oming as a practice. It's like you want to have tea with someone, you want to play tennis with someone, you want to om with someone. You can change your mindset where this is a, quote, sexy, romantic thing into this is a practice I can do with my friend. And if there's desire on top of that, which happened half an hour later with us, then you can pursue it. But it's really based on a practice of two people coming together to have this physical connection and to go beyond that.
Yeah. Well, the truth is you're speaking my personal language. I'm not I am monogamous. I'm not non-monogamous, and I have never owned. But I have a personal view that as we are more resource equal and have more financial and kind of academic and intellectual freedoms, people pursue what they want in terms of exploring their true selves, and some of that is sexuality. And that in addition, there's so much sexual energy that's just blocked up in the average person walking around with no mechanism for releasing that blockage, whatever the source, trauma or whatever. and that this is a wonderful solution. But it's just so unorthodox in our culture.
It's not for everyone.
Well, maybe eventually it could be, but right now it's just, it's just scary because it's new and people don't understand it. So I appreciate it, but I can also understand why some people listening are going to be skeptical. But it worked for you too. So then what happened next? You transitioned from that into a relationship pretty quickly?
Yes and no. So we had that experience, and then I just got this sense like this is an incredible woman. And so I think I asked her on a date. A couple of days later, we went to something called a blind movie, which was basically a movie that we were blindfolded. A friend of mine from London. So you had incredible sound, but you were blindfolded, and you could actually see the movie in your head. And so we sat next to each other in this date, kind of holding hands. So that was our first date.
That's so great. You went from unorthodox sexuality to unorthodox movie going.
And then the text messaging started and pretty much never stopped. Actually, for a present, I took the first 6 months of our text messaging and I downloaded it into a Word file and just made it really pretty. And it was, reading it again, it was like we got into a pretty intimate situation very quickly in terms of connection. And she started calling me hello, dear. Like I was like, good morning. And every morning I'd be like, good morning. And she'd be like, hello, dear. And I was like, oh, that feels so good. So within the first 2 weeks, there was a serious intimate connection.
Via text
and seeing each other.
We didn't actually talk on the phone until 6 months into our relationship. We hadn't had even one phone call together.
Nobody talks on the phone.
Yeah,
these
it
days.
was all texting.
Yeah, a lot of texting. In terms of, quote, relationship, I said to her very quickly that I was not going to have a commitment. I wasn't interested in having a commitment with her. My story is, in July of 2014, I left One Taste. By August of 2014, I got into a relationship that turned monogamous. And after 3 months, I realized that I was not readily prepared to have this relationship. There was issues, there was some stuck energy, there was some trauma in my body that I needed to clear.
Just yours or in the relationship?
Well, mine, and being in a relationship, I wasn't ready to show up to have a relationship. I wasn't, suitable. I wasn't clear enough. So in October of 2014, I said, I'm going to have a year of no commitments. I'm committing to no commitments. I'm committing to no commitments. That was kind of how it is in my head. Yeah. And then I met her in February, and we started dating in March. So in the beginning,
is that 6 months?
6 months, yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. So I basically said, if you're looking for a monogamous guy, I'm not. It was kind of like that in my head. I'm not that kind of guy. Like if you want monogamy, look elsewhere. Just so you know who I am. And that was
you're putting a kind of a petulant tone of voice on it, which means you must. And if you're self-aware of it, something must have transitioned.
Yeah, it was petulant. Because I wanted to be honest and be, this is all via text, right? So
yeah.
I wanted to be really honest and clear so there was no delusion. And then you had a feeling about that.
Well, I wasn't sure what I wanted at the time. So when he said that, I was kind of disappointed because I was like, oh, something's off the table. I'm not sure. I've always been a monogamous person and I haven't had the sexual experiences that he's had. And I haven't had the knowledge about open relationships and alternative ways of living. So when he said that, I was just like, oh no, I'm dying.
because you felt like you couldn't have the one thing that you knew was the way that relationships go?
Because I wasn't sure what I wanted. And I was just coming out of a marriage, a 9-year marriage that was monogamous. And it was the only thing that I knew at the time. But I also knew I wasn't sure if that was the thing for me. So kind of part of me was going, oh no, this is terrible. And then part of me was going, okay, well, I don't know if I want that either. So that might be okay. I was very conflicted.
Okay. Well, then what happened?
Today's episode is sponsored by Knock Knock, the makers of the beautifully designed and exceptionally useful Fill in the Love collection of fill-in-the-blank journals, postcards, and letters that you can use to express your love to anyone. Something we hear on the show over and over is how important it is to tell your partner what they mean to you. And you can't do it just once. This is something you've got to work on continually over time, which for some of us, like myself, can be a bit of a challenge. And that's where Knock Knock comes in. Their Fill in the Love collection makes it easy to tell your partner what they mean to you. You just fill in the blanks, and suddenly you've got a super cool and a really well-designed expression of your love.
I have to admit that when I first heard of Knock Knock, I was a little skeptical. I was thinking that a fill-in-the-blank gift, maybe it wouldn't feel so genuine, but I have to say, it turns out not to be a problem. Basically, they give you just enough to get started, and then they leave all the critical parts open for you to get as honest and, well, as gushy as you want to get. And they're so well designed that you feel good giving these to your partner. So check out their website at knockknockstuff.com. I think you're really going to like their stuff. I do. So send some love with Fill in the Love from Knock Knock.
Well, then what happened?
We dated for 3 or 4 months. We got more serious. About a month in, I was like, the word before my view screen was like, don't fuck this up. Like, just, this is something special. Do not fuck this up. And so she really elevated in my mind as, you know, I was playing around and dating and having sex and traveling and having experiences, but there was really, Morgan was already rising to the top of my favorite person to spend time with. And then, you know, probably a month in, my friend said, she's your girlfriend. And I'm like, she's not my girlfriend. I am Buddha. I am like no commitments. I have an agreement with myself. I'm not going to. She's like, Rob, she's your girlfriend. And I'm like, okay, she's not my girlfriend. She's my almost girlfriend. That's where the term came from.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was in April. And then about a month later, we went to Lightning in a Bottle, which is a music festival in May, right on Memorial Day. And then asked her to be my girlfriend.
At the festival?
At the festival. Not nice. The monogamous boyfriend, girlfriend, but to be my girlfriend.
Did you make that distinction when you made the ask?
Yes.
How did he word that, Morgan? Do you remember?
You did not specify. I said, what the heck does that mean? You're still fucking around with all these other ladies. You know, you're traveling and you're having experiences and you're doing all these things. That doesn't mean anything being your girlfriend while you're having experiences with a bunch of other women.
Yeah, it's stymied. It's stymied. I was like, but you're more. It's really like kind of like
you're my favorite.
More important. You're my favorite. You'll have some say, but not really. So basically, I was offering, saying you're special, but I wasn't really showing up. So she became my quote girlfriend, but we were still in that unknown.
Wait. She said she accepted this term that didn't mean anything?
Slightly reluctant, but I did say yes because I cared for him, and I was totally being open. I had no agenda at that time. I was kind of just going down the river.
You wanted, and it sounds like you wanted it to move forward at its pace. You were just going to let it take the pace that it was taking. Yeah. Okay, all right. So
then, for the next month or two, I would go off and have some experiences with women. And there was a change, though, because I would notice I would go off and have these really amazing, fun experiences, and then I'd come back and she'd be more and more distant. So I was overt. There was never any withholding. There was never any lying. I would have the experience. We had very clear communication. And I would go off and she would come back, and it would be kind of a distance. There would be like kind of this cold distance. And I had to kind of work my way back into her heart.
Each time you returned?
Each time, and it got worse as time went on. And so what happened was I realized not to diminish the experiences, but the experiences themselves were not worth the distance. So then I said to her, well, what do you want? I'll do anything. Do you want me to be monogamous? I'll be monogamous. Like I was willing to do anything to have that relationship because I felt my actions outside of it were diminishing it. And so I totally changed my tune. I was like, oh, fuck the year of no commitments. I'm committing. What do you want?
What did you say?
I said, I don't know what I want.
Now, so what was the coldness when he would return?
It just felt unsafe to me. Didn't feel... When he would go and have these experiences with women, I would ask him a lot of questions about his experiences because I really wanted to know what was going on. I wasn't there. I wasn't part of it.
Yeah.
So it was disconnection from us. We didn't have connection while he was connecting with these other women.
Yeah.
So the way that I would choose to connect to that would be to ask him a lot of questions and find out what did he like about these women, what was his experience. I just wanted to know all about it. And then, so I at that point, I was really in conflict. It was like, it was brewing. It was inside of me. I was not in alignment with, because I was having a lot of sadness and disappointment. But every time he would go, I would kind of feel alive almost to some degree because for so many years, I was numbed out to my life. And when he would go and have these experiences, some part of me would feel like sad and disappointed and I would cry, but it was like alive. I was having feelings. And before it had shut down a lot of my feelings. So at one point I said to Rob, I need to have some quiet time by myself to figure out what I really want, because I don't know what it is and I can't give you an answer. And we're just kind of going in circles of, I don't know.
So after she said that, I went to San Francisco.
For a sexual experience?
To see my parents.
Okay.
And part of that weekend was a date with a woman I had a crush on for like 6 years.
Wow. Okay.
And so I was really excited about the date. Finally, 6 years. I'm going to make out. Yes. And so then so she's no talking during this trip to San Francisco. And that hurt. I was just like, oh man.
So wait, normally you would talk when you were on a trip with a woman?
Yeah. I never went on a trip with a woman. I would go to a city, have sometimes one or several experiences, but I would see friends or do business. So it wasn't a trip with a woman. It was a trip where women were involved.
Got it.
So this San Francisco trip, she texted me on Saturday. She says, I'm ready to talk. And I said, great. I was really like, great. And then she said, why don't you want to say it?
Well, so I had 2 days of just like meditation and journaling and trying to figure out what I really wanted. And then I had this moment where I kind of experienced it like an out-of-body moment where I saw myself from above. And I realized that I was not this relationship, that my value was, I was not, if he chose me or not chose me, it was like I needed to ask for what I really wanted in my heart. And if he was a no, I was still me and I was still wonderful and I was still okay. And so I think that was part of my conflict of deciding what I really wanted, because I was not sure if he said no to what I wanted, what did that mean about me? You know what I mean?
Right.
So once I had that experience, like I am me, perfect and wonderful, independent of anything else that goes on in this world, I could ask him for what I wanted, which was to have experiences together, to not have the disconnection. Because every time he would go on an experience with a woman, I felt extreme disconnection. I was not part of it. I wasn't there. I wasn't experiencing the emotion and all those things. And even though he would text me afterwards and before, it was still their intimacy and I wasn't part of it. So
I didn't expect that. I love that answer, but it does make me wonder, was that part of you still trying to make the relationship work and not being true to yourself?
No, because we had an experience with a woman, with 2 women before that.
2 women. 2 experiences, 2 women.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
2 different experiences where we had it together. So I knew the contrast. I knew those experiences when we had them together felt really good.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the women, like just the connection between the women. And then the experiences that he had alone, it felt so disconnected. So I knew the differences.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so that meant that you couldn't have the date with the woman that you had a crush on for 7 years.
She said, this is what I want. Uh-huh. And I was like, I can totally do that. That works perfect. I'm a total yes to that. And then she said, go have your date and then come home.
Oh, so finish this one out.
Yeah. Keep the date.
That's kind of nice. That's really sweet of you. High five.
And I said to her, I sat for a minute and I was like, I don't want to. I'm gonna cancel that date. I'm gonna come home tomorrow and see you instead.
I didn't expect you to say that either. Yeah. That's really lovely.
Yeah. And I called my friend and she was totally awesome. She's like, take care of your relationship. I love you. Maybe this lifetime or the next.
Yeah.
And then I got in the car the next day and I drove home, and that was the start of the deepest intimacy I've ever had with a person, let alone a woman, in my entire life. It was just, I authentically believed her and I authentically said yes in my heart. And then from that, our whole lives have expanded.
And now you say that the 2 of you have currently the deepest intimacy that you've ever experienced, Robert.
Without comparison. Nothing. Like, not even close.
Same for you?
Absolutely same. I'm the most authentic person I've ever been with myself and with him. And it's incredible, yeah.
Sounds like it came from largely from that insight where you realize that you're fine as an individual.
A lot of it,
regardless of. Mm-hmm. Okay, now 2 questions that come to mind right away out of that. The first is there's a criticism or a critique, I guess I hear, from people who are not polyamorous or non-monogamous, people who are monogamous and kind of ideologically so, often will say the following. I know that there's people out there who have convinced themselves that they're non-monogamous, but actually what's always happening is that one person wants to be monogamous and just likes the non-monogamous person enough that they're willing to stick it out in hopes that it will eventually become a monogamous relationship. And that they're either doing that consciously or unconsciously. And so there's really no non-monogamous relationship that's healthy and balanced where both parties are involved in that ideology. And I understand why they say that. Having interviewed a lot of non-monogamous people on the show, I don't think that's the case. I think there are people who are very healthfully in these relationships. But your story almost sounds like that. You know, your story almost sounds like unconsciously you knew that you didn't want, all along you knew you didn't want non-monogamy, but you liked him enough that you were willing to suffer it. Is there any truth to that?
I don't think that's true. And I'll tell you why. So what happened was I was in a 9-year marriage, and then it was a very unhappy marriage. But what happened was at some point, I read this book, Sex at Dawn.
Sex at Dawn?
Yes.
I don't know that book.
Oh, must read.
Changed my life. Because what I read explained to me why so many men I had dated had kind of, they had the wandering eye when I was around them. And at first I thought, okay, I'm not enough. They're still looking for someone else. When I read Sex at Dawn, it explained to me the biology of how we all have a lot of desire and how there's so much societal dogma we live our lives by. And then I started to go, oh my gosh, what if I've just been following the rules this whole time and I had no idea what I myself wanted? I was not in touch with myself. So I went to my then, husband, my now ex-husband, and said, would you be open to trying something new? And he was a no.
He was a no to anything new. What did you have in mind?
I had no idea because I had had 2 sexual partners in my entire life, including my husband. And I was 28. And I had this experience on my wedding day, like, oh my God, I'm never going to kiss or touch or be touched by another man in my entire life. I might die.
Yeah.
And then I got married.
Yeah.
So because I just didn't think there was any other options, I just thought this is normal wedding jitters. This is what people go with. And I had shut down my sex so much, So I don't think that what you're describing, I understand what your point is. And I don't think that that's true because I was at this place. And now, a year and a half later, I don't think I ever want to be 100% monogamous ever in our entire lives.
Really?
Yeah.
Even if you could, you wouldn't want to.
No, I would not want to.
She has more sexual curiosity and desire than I do. And I would say that her appetite for experiences is larger than mine. Even though it looks like I'm the guy who has a bigger appetite, she actually does. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate into real life physical experiences, but the appetite could be just the exploration of what that appetite is asking for or looking for. So we spend hours talking about our desires, hours, playing and planning and plotting and talking about people we meet or experiences. Like, it gets down to some fine details. We're in bed, we're talking about that person or those persons or making up people or planning things. And when it comes down to it, the actual physical interactions is a very small percentage because we have the agreement to be honest with each other and share our desires. Then there's freedom. Most couples have so much. I think those couples are lying, honestly.
Which ones?
The ones who say, that bullshit you said in the beginning. It's like, I think those people are lying, but mostly to themselves. So it's not the physical going out and doing it that's important to us. It's the freedom for me to bring up every single thought in my mind is welcomed by her. Every single thought in her mind is welcomed by me. And in doing so, there's an incredible amount of honesty and openness that we have with each other. And in doing so, we feel free. It's not about the acting. It's about the revealing.
It's never about the act but you do act sometimes.
We do. And we have the freedom to. But I'm just saying it's a very small percentage of it.
And when you say the freedom to communicate, you mean about everything, which is a common thread with every healthy couple I've ever interviewed, by the way. But you mean specifically with regards to sexual desire as it arises.
It could be sex, it could be intimacy, it could be love, it could be attraction. Because there's these rules in society that says that we're married Therefore, I must be the only one for you, which isn't true. I mean, look how many people cheat. So many people say they're monogamous, but they cheat. And they not only cheat physically, but they cheat emotionally.
Yeah, the statistics are in the 70 to 80% range.
Which I think is low. Which I mean, and we have this as bad. And from my perspective, it's human. You know, Christopher Ryan's book, Sex at Dawn, it's human. It's life. But we put ourselves in boxes, and in the boxes we suffocate. And that's where the dissolution of marriage is coming from. That's where the unhappiness is coming from. It's in the honesty and the bravery to say, you know, moving past your shame and saying, I thought of this nasty thing with the girl at the checkout line. That's where the juice of life comes from.
Okay, I get the theory. Now tell me some examples. So, girl at the checkout line.
Right.
You have a nasty thought. Do you, by definition, pull out your phone and communicate that to her right away? Or is it just because you know you're free to communicate it to her, you sometimes do and sometimes don't?
It depends.
Am I asking the right question?
It's a great question. So it could be, if it sticks, if I have that experience and then I go about my day and it's a busy day, I'll probably forget about the experience and I won't tell her. If it's a slow day and I'll sit down and my cup of coffee after my groceries, I might text her and say, sexy thought for the day. Fantasizing about the checkout girl, asking her out to come home with us, you know, which sounds cheesy in my mind, but it's just like it's in there. And then I send it, and she's like, "Ooh, tell me more." And then we have a dialogue about it. The checkout girl never knows.
Yeah.
No one else. I just go about my day, or at night I'll be like, "Oh, I had this thought today," but it's not like a rule. Like every rule must relate to Morgan. It's like, what is the desire inside of me? What's true inside of me, and what does that signify? It signifies maybe it's time, you know, I have a hunger I haven't felt before. Maybe there's, you know, an invitation for us to communicate more. Maybe it's an invitation for us to touch more or have sex more. I don't know. But in the releasing of the truth, then there's possibility. In the withholding of the truth, that's where couples shut down.
Okay, now, is there anything you wouldn't share? You're going to say no, but really, is there anything you wouldn't share?
There's absolutely nothing I wouldn't share.
Now, what if you wanted to take that checkout girl in the back and have your way with her alone and not involve Morgan, and that was what you really, really wanted?
I would say, this is what I really, really wanted. I wouldn't do it because we do have the agreement to have these experiences together. In that guideline, in that container, that's where the safety occurs.
Now, Morgan, if he said, I want to take her in the back room and not involve you, wouldn't that feel hurtful?
I might have some feelings about that. That is true. I might. And I would share that with him. I would just say, I'm having some feelings about that. I'm really glad that you felt that way. And this is where I'm at right now.
Or I wish you hadn't felt that way.
No, I would never say, I wish you didn't have it. Because I want him to have every single desire. I actually want him to experience everything that he wants to experience, because I put myself in a box for a lot of years where I was like in a cage in this marriage, where I shamed myself and I judged myself and did all those things to myself. And now that I'm free, I would never want to do that to myself or to anyone else ever again. I really think that he should have everything that he wants to have. And it's okay for me to have my feelings about it. This is the way I parent also. It's okay for us to have our feelings.
So I'll give you more of a specific example.
Well, but let me dig in just a little bit farther on that one, and then we'll come back to your example. So two points of digging. What if what he wants ultimately results in you two splitting?
That's okay. It would hurt me. It would be sad for me. It would be like, I mean, I love this person so much and we're committed to spending the rest of our lives together. And at the same time, if something came up that wasn't, we both didn't have the mutual desire, we were going in different directions, I would know that the universe will provide me someone better for me. That's a better match. And I trust. I really do trust.
Okay. And then the second point of digging is, what if he wanted to do something really scary and violent to her? And that was his desire in the moment, and he shared that with you.
I would still approve of it. I wouldn't like shame him for it.
You would approve of?
I would approve of his thought, of his desire, whatever it is. I wouldn't say like, go do it.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I would also say like, where is that coming from? And I would just ask more questions, because I'm a very curious person and I would like to know, what's his mind thinking? What is he really wanting? Maybe there's something underneath it, like a childhood wound or something, a desire, or I don't know. It could go in any direction, but the thing is getting curious.
And then in the process of getting curious, if it goes and it goes and it goes, and eventually it becomes clear that he deeply wants to and probably will do something that you just cannot tolerate, what does that mean?
It might mean that we are not a match. And that's okay.
And that's okay for the reason that you already stated.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. What was your example, Robert?
Well, let's go back to that because the example, you actually talked about the proof of the example. So before I made the agreement to make out with other women while she was there, we were becoming less of a match. This chasm of me going off and having experiences by myself was dissolving the relationship. And I knew it. And I could tell that I needed to do something. She even like something to my mom, and my mom was like, Robert, you need to pay attention to this. So it was like, okay. And that's when I said, I'll do anything. What do you want? What do you want to change? And so when she said, this is what I want, I was like, of course. Like, this relationship is the most important thing to me. And to the point, like, if we split up, I would be devastated. My heart would be broken. You know, there would be so much feelings on top of it. And like she said, I knew I'll be fine. So I don't want to be in a relationship out of fear of being alone or fear of abandonment. That is a very common thing I've seen. And it sucks. I mean, it's just so horrible how many people are together because of their fear of being alone. And that's not a relationship. That's prison. So I'm not going to put her in a prison. I'm not going to put me in a prison. We're in this relationship every single day, and we work at this thing every single day to ensure that the desire is there. And what happens is when you put attention on it and clear away those little things getting in the way, that's why our relationship is the best I've ever had.
Yeah. And anything to add to that?
I agree. I think that that's what happened in my past marriage. Was
prison.
I said to myself, I would rather be alone for the rest of my life than stay in this relationship because I created that same prison.
It takes so much. Is it courage? Yeah, it takes courage to get to that place, and then it opens up so much.
Well, it's not even courage. It's self-validation. It's self-approval. It's like, okay, we don't compromise. Like, we do not compromise. We'll talk for hours to find the spot that works. But so many people compromise, and they compromise. And to me, I am an incredible person with a mission in the world. And if I'm going to diminish myself to be in a relationship, that's cheating the world. That's cheating myself. Now, luckily, I found someone who expands and compliments me like no one else. But if this relationship was shrinking me, I would either change it or I would split. And I would split not only for me, but for her children, for our friends. There's a responsibility that I take very seriously, that I want my relationship to be optimal as an example for other people, but also for me.
Well, that's it for part 1 of our episode with Robert and Morgan, folks. Thanks for listening. Part 2 gets even better, if I may say so. We dig into the question of whether or not there is any compromise in relationships. These two stand firm on their opinion, and it's not what you might expect. I definitely test their theory, so be sure to tune in for next week. I think you'll like it. If you'd like to learn more about Robert, you can find his business consulting website at candellconsulting.com. That's Kandell consulting.com, and I'll put a link to that in our show notes. And be sure to check out our sponsors for today's episode, Knock Knock, makers of the Fill in the Love collection of fill-in-the-blank journals, postcards, and letters that you can use to express your love to anyone. You can find their website at knockknockstuff.com, and I'll put that in our show notes. I really think you're going to like what they've got. Send some love with Fill in the Love from Knock Knock. And if you like what you heard on our show, please subscribe to us on iTunes. I can't tell you what a difference it makes when you do that. And you might also consider donating to our Patreon campaign. We're on a mission to crush shame, and every penny really helps because our expenses, I have to admit, are much greater than our income at this point. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out to us via one of our platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both at together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. That's all for today, folks. See you next Monday.